now. So for those of you who aren't able to be here live, you'll be able to follow up with the CE and get that within 2 weeks. So 2 weeks of today, making January the 20th the last day that you'll be eligible to claim CE for this. I will send out a survey after this, and that's how we'll track your attendance and get you CE credit as well. Disclosures, no one has any disclosures as far as I know. Nothing's been disclosed about this presentation from any of the organizers or any of the presenters today. This is fully accredited for CPE credit with 2 contact hours under ACPE for the presentations tonight. So thank you guys for joining us for those. There's no charge for this, but you will have to follow up, as I said, within 2 weeks in order to claim that credit. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ashley Thompson, who will be sharing with us her topic of time management and organization. So I will stop sharing and I'll let Ashley take over the share.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dexter, for that introduction.
And Ashley, I'll manage the chat and questions. So if anything comes up, I'll verbalize that to you as you go.
Okay, sounds great. Feel free to just interrupt me. So thanks for having me for this session. There's a lot of names that I don't know. So just a quick introduction. My name's Ashley. I'm one of the pharmacist supervisors. I oversee adult clinical pharmacy services at UCSF Health, but I still work in the ICU as one of the MICU pharmacists. So I was actually on service, I believe, last week. So here's my presentation outline. So I'm going to talk a little bit about prioritization of tasks, productivity and organization. Part 2, calendar management and inbox management, and some tips and tricks there. And then part 3, we'll end with, forming good habits and cultivating willpower. So to start off, we'll talk about task management. So what is time or task management? I really love this quote by James Clear, who's the author of Atomic Habits. You can't manage time because there are always 24 hours in a day. Time management is about managing yourself. So no matter how much we want there to be more time in the day, there's always 24 hours. Time ticks at a steady cadence. And so time management is really about personal management. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. So to really effectively manage your time or managing tasks, I really think it starts with developing a system to collect all your tasks and all of your deliverables. Your mind is really for having ideas, not holding them. And this is a quote by David Allen, who is the author of Getting Things Done. So you really need to move tasks and projects out of your mind to an external location where you can break it into actionable items. And this could be an electronic task keeper. It could be a paper system. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. And we'll talk about this in some of the later slides. When you can remove things from your mind into a task list, it really decreases the cognitive load so you can focus on creative thinking and action. If you really spend your energy on trying to remember things, then you use up energy for creative thinking, for creative problem solving, and for actually committing to action to do those tasks. So I can't reiterate enough that I really think one of the most effective strategies for time management is developing a task management system that you can rely on. So here's some principles of task management. The very first thing is you need to capture or collect these ideas in your mind. So have a reliable system. Again, it could be paper-based. I really like electronic to-do systems to capture all of these ideas that you have. And when you're capturing these ideas, you don't have to process them. If you have a thought like, I need to go to the store and get milk, write it down somewhere. I've got to call the dentist to make an appointment for my kids, write it down. I really need to start on that evaluation for the resident on service, write that down somewhere too. You shouldn't, have to remind yourself like, okay, I need to do this resident presentation. I'm going to start it later today. Okay, I've got to remember to do this later today. You should get it out of your mind so you can focus on the clinical care of your patient, whatever other projects that you're working on, so you can, free up that space for creative thinking. So that's the very first step. And I think it's really, really important to just develop a system that you can capture all of these thoughts. The second step is to clarify or process these things. So what does that mean? So a lot of times I will just dump things into a to-do list as they come into my mind. I'm walking to work and I have all of these thoughts about what I need to accomplish for the day, or when I get home, or next week, or a project that I think we should really start. And I'll just dump them all into a task list with very little information. I don't add to-do dates yet, and I don't add microplans. So the next step is looking at all of these things that you've dumped into your task list and processing them, adding to-do lists, maybe taking a minute to write a microplan. So what is a microplan? That might be, I have to do my evaluation for the resident on service. Okay, so that might be the larger task. The microplan might be step 1, email preceptors that interacted with this resident. Step 2, block off time on my calendar to put together the resident evaluation. Step 3, reach out to the resident to schedule a time. Step 4, complete the evaluation with the resident. Step 5, submit to farm academic. And all of these should be written down. So as you complete each microtask, you can check them off. And it should have a to-do date, so you know when you need to start on the next task. Again, organizing it. So I used to have a lot of lists, but I've collapsed them down over the years. So you might have a number of lists. So I have a today list, which is basically all of the things that I need to accomplish in the next couple of weeks. It's my working to-do list for both work and personal. So I believe in work-life integration. So I put everything in the same list. I have a projects idea list. So these are projects that aren't urgent, but I really think would be good projects. So when I have, free time, which happens so often here at UCSF, I'll peruse that project list and maybe move things over into my today list. I also will house like resident research project ideas, QI project ideas, projects that I can have residents on leadership and management work on, projects that maybe APPE students can work on. That way, as I have these ideas, I don't have to remember them when, many months later, when Mandy sends out a resident research idea list, I'm like, what was that idea I had? No, I just go to my list and I pull the ones that I think are interesting. I have another to-do list, which is agendas or one-on-ones, where as I think of something that I need to talk to somebody about, I'll add it to that list. And so that's where this organizes. So I'll usually dump all of my ideas into one list, and then I'll organize them into other lists. A review. So this is also, I would say, a really important part of having a reliable and efficient task management system. You need to review it, because if you don't review it, you can't trust it, because you're not actually accomplishing the things on your task list. So I review, and I review my task list probably a lot more than the average person, but probably 7 to 10 times a day, even on the weekends. And it's the first thing I do in the morning. I organize my day and my priorities. I look at my calendar so I see how much time I actually have. And if I don't have a lot of time and maybe I have a lot of meetings, I'll retask the lower priority items for another day. It's something that I do throughout the day, because often things will come at me throughout the day that I need to fit in. And so my time shrinks or other things become higher priority. And it's something that I definitely do at the end of the day. It's rare that I get to all of my to-do lists that I've assigned to myself for the day. So I always leave my lower priority tasks for, the end of the day. And I'll figure out when I can fit those in at another time. And then 5, of course, this is really important. You need to actually do the items on your to-do list. Otherwise, it's just housing ideas, but you're not actually accomplishing anything. So this is just an example of, a bad task list and a good task list. So a bad task list would be time management presentation with no due date and no microplan. And a good task, not list, but item would be time management presentation due 1/14/21, find a slide template, UCSF brand 16.9, because that's the template that I like. I have old slides from other presentations, so find those and see what I can use. Pull relevant slides in a new presentation, create a presentation outline, build slides, include one active participation. And then here's actually a screenshot. It's not my whole to-do list, but you can see that I created this item, or maybe you can't see because the font's really small, on Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020. So it's well in advance of the presentation. So I can start thinking about what I need to do. And then I, kind of move through this micro plan over the course of a few months to put together the whole presentation. And so just kind of a summary of task management, and I've already gone over aspects of this, but I really enjoy this quote as well. If your mind is empty, it is always ready for anything and it is open to everything. So download a cloud-based task keeper, or if you're old school, find a paper system that you trust. Dump all of the ideas in your head or all the to-do things that are swimming around, so capture into your collection tool. Organize to-do dates, details, so process all of your projects and tasks. Everything in your to-do list after you've processed the items should have a due date. And often, because I'm dumping things in my to-do list throughout the day and I'm utilizing this capture process, if you look at my to-do list at any one point, it isn't complete with due dates, but that's because I'm constantly capturing things. But I do take time to process all of my projects and tasks throughout the day. Organize your items into a correct list. So that's filing them away if you have multiple lists. Keep your system current, complete, and reviewed at least once or twice a day, I would say, for anybody. But if you have a lot of task items, you might need to review your to-do list multiple times a day. And then engage with your to-do list. You should at least engage with one action item on your to-do list every single day. So here's an example. So I used to have Wunderlist, but they were acquired by Microsoft To Do. So I took this screenshot this weekend. So that's why you see, this is my work-life integration. So I have, the time management presentation because I needed to finish it up this past weekend. Blinds, other, work items, but also personal items. These are my different lists. So I have a today, work projects in flight, and there's a lot of micro plans in each of these items, work ideas, manual updates, meeting agendas, personal someday, and personal for me. And then, when you open one task, you actually have a micro plan after you've processed all the items. There's also, a lot of great paper plan systems. I like cloud-based lists because when I'm at work, I have it open all day, so I can process all day. When I'm not at work or when I'm walking, it's on my phone, so I can add things if I have ideas that come into my head while I'm out and about and not in front of a computer. But I think paper systems are really great. I know people that have really tried to utilize a cloud-based task system, and they've really just fallen back to paper and really enjoyed that process. I also have a whiteboard at home. So I have a cloud-based to-do system, and then I have a whiteboard that we use for visual reminders. And you can see there's one for dad, one for my 10-year-old, one for my 8-year-old, and then a whole side for me. And things that I'll put on my whiteboard are things that I need to do on the weekends, maybe when I'm not as connected to my device. It might be like take out trash on Wednesday. And sometimes I forget to do that in the evenings because I'm not looking at my to-do list all evening. So it might be things that I need to be at home to accomplish. So this is the only active participation that I have throughout this, but I really encourage you all to just take a few minutes. If you don't have a task keeper, please download one. A good starting place is Microsoft To Do. It does integrate with Outlook if you want that system. Dexter's shaking his head. Is that what you use, Dexter? I know Mandy. That's what you use. I know Mandy uses Trello, or at least she used to, which is great. Do you still use Trello, Mandy?
I still do. I love it. I'm going to take the opportunity to update it a little bit right now for 5 minutes.
Yeah. So if you don't have something, please download something and take this time to at least get this process started. And if you do have something, process your items or capture all the things that are swimming in your head. And then we'll move on to the next part. Kendall, you use a paper system now, correct?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. So Kendall was one that moved away from a electronic system. She was who I had in mind when I added the screenshot of the journal.
Right here. I just found out, I like Trello still for bigger projects, but I actually just found myself writing little Post-its all the time to get my tasks done. And then I just realized I needed to own that and write my written to-do list to get things done. I really like it.
And what brand do you use? Because I know sometimes, doing the research to find the perfect planner can be challenging. So for those of you who like paper planners, Kendall?
Yeah, I've been all the way down the rabbit hole. I used to use one from a brand called Mochi Things, and they have a lot of options. I used the one called Artium, and I really liked it because it had a weekly plan and then a sort of free note page across from it for my to-do list. And they discontinued the size that I like. So I'm now using one called Appointed, which is essentially the same but bigger. It has like a weekly plan on one side and task lists on the other. And I think it's helpful because you can task certain things for a given day. And then other things are just your running to-do list for the week. So you're not like rewriting your Post-it every day. It kind of is the best of both. And something about that processing is better for me too.
Great, thanks, Kendall. So we will go ahead and move on. So now we're going to move on to improving your productivity and focus. Oops. So focus is really your key to productivity. I know you're like, duh, of course. If I could only focus, I could be more productive. The definition of focus is the act of concentrating your interest or activity on something. It really requires you to say yes to one option and no to everything else. It's really that simple. So just say yes to one thing that you're working on and no to everything else. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that. You may be wondering, but I have emails to respond to and I get text messages and I have an Apple Watch and it's pinging me all day. So we'll talk about how to manage those distractions. But really, multitasking, it doesn't exist. So what you're doing instead is you're rapidly task switching. And when you task switch, it's cognitively expensive and it actually reduces your efficiency. So for example, if you're working on a task and you get distracted by an email, it takes you on average 64 seconds to refocus on this other task that you were working on before you got interrupted by email. So distractions are really, really costly. And switching costs is the performance disruption for task switching. So really, even though we all say we live in this era of multitasking, it undermines productivity. And I think that when we're working on either a project or we're working on patients for the day, or we're doing our clinical reviews, or we're putting together a performance resident evaluation, we really need to reduce the distractions as much as possible so we can focus on that one task, and it'll really improve our productivity, and we'll be able to accomplish more throughout the day without that cognitive load that we get when we switch back and forth. So we'll maintain that level of energy for longer. So how do we stay in the accomplishing zone? So, the results curve is, over time, we have this peak productivity where we get into the flow. It's almost like time doesn't exist. We're so focused on what we're doing that the world blurs around us and we are getting a lot done. But as time goes on, our productivity starts to dwindle down and it's time to take a break. Now, when you are interrupted by emails or your phone or text messages or social media or your thoughts or anything else that's going on, this accomplishment zone is fractured. And so you might get up and you're doing a really good job, and then your productivity falls to zero because you were distracted. And then it takes a while to ramp back up, and then you're distracted and your productivity falls to zero. So here's some tips and tricks for improving productivity. So if you're new to this, think of one anchor task a day. So choose one priority for every working day. And this is the anchor task that no matter what you want, you are going to accomplish that one thing before the day's over. And having that goal in mind can help improve your focus on accomplishing that one thing. So it's also really about managing energy, not time. So if you are most energetic in the morning, that's when you should schedule in your biggest task, or that's when you should really, shut down email and try to get through as many patient clinical reviews as you can, or do these more cognitively expensive tasks, because if your energy reduces over time or throughout the day, so does your productivity. Email, I really think, is the death of productivity because it's so easy. You hear ping and it's alluring and you want to look and see what's happening. I shut down my email or I turn off the volume because I get really anxious. Sometimes I get, or on average, probably 30 emails an hour, sometimes 50. And so it can make me feel anxious, like I'm getting really behind. So I just turn all that off because I want to focus on whatever I need to accomplish. Another tip is work in full screen mode. So you're not seeing other things in the background. So if you're working on a dual monitor screen and you really only need one monitor, turn off the other monitor. If you're working on one big screen, try to work in full screen so you're not seeing these other distractions. How many of you have heard of the Pomodoro technique? Okay, I'm seeing some hands, some thumbs up. So I really think the Pomodoro technique is a really great way to stay focused and break up your time. So what this means is, when you're utilizing the Pomodoro technique, one Pomodoro might be plan your tasks. So what are you going to accomplish for this one Pomodoro that you're about to embark on? When you plan your task, maybe create a quick micro plan. So if you don't have a micro plan in your to-do list already, you can just take a sheet of paper and write out a little plan for the day. If you have a block of time free, so if you have a project day or you finished your clinical work for the day and you're like, I have these 2 hours, how many Pomodoros might you need? The accomplishing zone is one Pomodoro. So this is where you really turn off the world and you set a timer for the amount of time that you think you could be productive. When that timer goes off, if you're still feeling like you're in the zone, you can continue to work. Just because the timer goes off doesn't mean that you have to, shut down your task and take a break. But the idea is that you can, the Pomodoro timer goes off, you can turn the world back on and take a short break. And I find this really effective. So if you have 30 minutes as your starting point, sometimes I get distracted and I have a thought that I need to check something, and I'll look at my timer and I have 11 minutes left. So it's a way for me to refocus my energy on the task at hand for 11 more minutes. Then I know, okay, in 11 minutes, I'll take that break and check my email, look at the text that I see pinging in the background. Most things can wait for 11 minutes. And per the Pomodoro technique, after 4 Pomodoros, you take a longer break and then you should really start again. And so when you're in the middle of this, accomplishing zone and doing 1 Pomodoro, not multitasking, because that doesn't exist, not task switching, but focused on one thing, you really need to optimize your environment so you're not distracted. This includes turning off your phone or setting it to do not disturb, silence your watch if you have an Apple Watch, close your inbox. As I said, emails, the death of productivity. Put on headphones, especially if you're in an open office and there's other people around, and that signals to them, hopefully, that not to bother you. Other strategies that I've heard is people have had little signs like, productivity and progress, and with like a red. So basically, don't talk to me. And then the flip side is interruptions welcome. I like listening to classical music or white noise, especially if I'm in a busy place. And then when you're in that Pomodoro, 25 minutes to 45 minutes is a good default. Everyone has a different amount of time that they can stay focused. So I would say customize this to what feels good for you. In the morning, for example, for me, I'm more energetic and I can stay focused for longer periods of time. So maybe I could set a timer for longer. But as the day progresses, I get it's like I'm a squirrel, like I'm more distracted and my focus shifts a little more easily. So a shorter timer might work better. Having a micro plan is helpful. So if there is an interruption, and sometimes there are, despite your best effort to optimize your environment, at least if you have a micro plan, someone interrupts you, it's easier to find your place and start where you left off, as opposed to taking 60 seconds to really wonder where were you? And it looks like there's some chats. Oh, okay, good. So people are just loving the Pomodoro. Have a sheet of paper. So one of the things that I find is most distracting when I'm working on something is thoughts. Like, oh my gosh, I might have a thought, I need to get eggs on the way home. And then I pick up my phone to add get eggs on my way home because, I'm capturing that thought in my to-do list. And then when I look at my phone, oh my gosh, I have 11 unread text messages and 54 emails. And then before I know it, I'm down that rabbit hole. So it's a lot better to just write it on a piece of paper, be old school. And then when it's time for that break, you can then kind of attend to all of these other things. Thing that I think is important for productivity and maximizing your time is the Pareto principle. So it's this 80-20 rule, which is essentially a small number of efforts called vital tasks account for the majority of results. So 20% of your effort provides 80% of the results. So the idea is start with your most difficult or high value task first. So if you're sitting down to work on something, whatever you think is the highest value or the most cognitively difficult, you should definitely do first. All right, so now I'm going to switch gears to calendar management. I'll just gloss through this because I know we have a diverse audience. So best practices for calendar use. I really think everyone should review their calendar at the start and end of each work week. So if you're looking at what you have going on for the week, whether it's students or residents you're precepting, evaluations, projects, deliverables that are due back, competencies, whatever it may be, prepare a list of action items. So capture all of those things in your task manager, and then review at the end of the week, maybe what you didn't address. So tasks don't belong in your calendar, because what happens is if you put a task in your calendar and that date comes and goes, then your task just kind of disappears into the past and you forget about it. So tasks belong in a task management system, but you can schedule time in your calendar to do the task. So I might have a task that is, prepare, finalize clinical collaborative agenda, send out updated agenda with meeting documents, and it might be due on Tuesday. And if I know that that task takes me 45 minutes and I want to and I already have 6.5 hours of meetings, I'm going to block off that time so the whole day doesn't get eaten up and then I forget to do it or I don't have time to do it. So I can block off time to do it, but that task actually lives in a task management system. Other tips for calendar management is have your learners kind of manage their own items. So if you're working with a resident on a resident research project, they should own the calendar invite. They should send out the Zoom. They should centralize all the deliverables. That isn't something that you need to do. If you're working with a resident, you need to schedule their final evaluation, have them schedule it for you. So have, as much as possible, your learners send out the meeting invites. It's good for them to learn how to manage these administrative tasks anyway. Attach everything you can to the meeting invite. So when you're sitting down with the resident and you're working on whatever aspect of the resident research project, for example, you already have all the hyperlinks that go to the different folders that you need to access to be productive in that meeting. You have the Zoom in the meeting invite so you can, interact with your learner remotely. You shouldn't have to search around your email or to all of these external locations to find what you need for the meeting. It should all be contained within that invite and your learners can do that for you. So inbox management. So really your goals are to reduce the clutter in your inbox to maximize the efficiency and the effectiveness and the impact. We all want to be super responsive in our emails and make sure that we've attended to everything that we need to. We're such a email heavy, society. And, if you have thousands and thousands of emails in your inbox, sometimes things get lost and you don't respond to things, you don't finish your competency, deliverables not reviewed on time. So it's really helpful if you can keep your inbox clutter-free and with only emails that you haven't attended to yet. And so inbox 0 is really the ideal state. And even though, I get hundreds of emails a day, I really strive to have as little in my inbox as possible. And so how do you do that? You should really only be checking email when you can properly attend to it. So now you've scheduled email as a task. You're sitting down to address your inbox. Something you can do is email scan by subject and author to see what you need to maybe respond to more urgently. Delete and archive emails that aren't pertinent to you. You can file emails that are informational, so maybe you need it for later, but you don't need it right now, into folders. If an email takes less than 2 minutes to complete, just do it. There's no point in opening your inbox to attend to emails if you can't address any of them. Because what just happens is you reduce your efficiency and your productivity because then you have to read that email again. So you really want this one touch rule where you look at it and then you decide what to do with it. And if it's less than 2 minutes, you can just take care of it. If an email takes longer, that certainly happens to all of us. So sometimes I've carved out, 30 minutes to clear out my inbox. Bam, there's an email that's going to take me 45 minutes to respond to. That could be a competency that you're overdue for, or somebody needs you to research something and get back to them. Add something to your to-do list, right? Because now that's a task. It's not something that you can do in that time, with a due date and a clear plan. And then you can move the email over into a folder. So I have a to-do list type of folder. So I'll put in my task where I put that email. So then I don't have to spend time searching for it later. It's really important. They say that batching emails is really important. So not having your inbox open all day, but choosing times throughout the day to look at email and kind of batch and process your emails. So what happens if you have 10,000, how many of you have over 1,000 emails in your inbox? If you are one of those people, you don't have to go through all 10,000 emails to implement the system. You can maybe highlight all emails that are 2 weeks and older and move them older into one folder. And then you start your system for the emails from the last 2 weeks. And if that's too many, just the last week. So you still have the emails and you can search for them, like maybe an archive folder. I call mine catch-all. That's where if I'm not sure where to file something, but I'm sure that I'll need it later, or I want to make sure that I have it as a reference, I'll put it in a catch-all folder. And then you can just clean up whatever's left and you can start your system. So no need after today to have thousands and thousands of emails in your inbox. They can all be nice and clear and organized. Another way to do this, if you display your emails as conversations, it's a way that it compresses them down. So you're not, if you have 10 responses to one chain, if it's not displayed as conversation, they'll be scattered throughout your inbox. So this way it's all, one expandable conversation. Here's some, and you'll have these slides if you want to look at them later. So some folder suggestions. I have a to-do. So that's where if I add it to my task list, I'll file the email in a to-do list. I have a waiting for, so that we all have emails that it's critical someone responds to. Or maybe we email someone that often doesn't respond and we need a response. So I have a waiting for folder that I go through at least once a week. And I make sure that I've received the response for all the emails that I need to. And if I don't, then I just send a friendly reminder. And if I have received the response that I need, I can file it away. Maybe a projects, teaching, committee, operations for all those CUDA, 13 satellite, OR emails. Personal, I think we all have a personal email. A catch-all, so that's where if I don't know where to file something, I put it in my catch-all folder, and then an archive. So you can have all of your emails in Outlook organized alphabetically. And if you put a star or a star, it brings it to the top. So even though to-do would be at the bottom, if I alphabetized it, I put a star so it's at the very top. So I can file things away there.
There's a question from Rima. She says, this is wonderful, Ashley. Thank you for the helpful info. Curious, does Microsoft To Do integrate with Outlook and Teams?
It does. Yeah, so if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, that it integrates with like all of the Microsoft applications we have. And so you can add plugins that help improve the efficiency of your email processing. So if you need to create a task out of an email, and you have Microsoft To Do in your work Outlook, you can do that. If you don't want to do all of these email, folders, the trusted trio is an archive, a follow-up or to-do, and a hold or catch-all. So you can always just make those 3 folders if you want a simpler system and utilize those. So other strategies, if you're really wanting to reduce your distractions, email pause, so you're not getting emails all day. That way you can push emails to your cellular device as you open the application. You can create rules. So if you would be happy never to see a daily lineup again, you can create a rule so it automatically filters to that folder. And then you can also remove a pop-up feature. So I know I get distracted if emails are popping up in the corner. Whenever I get a new email, I've turned off my sound so I don't hear that ping. So you can disable the pop-up feature. All right, so now we're going to move on to kind of implementation of these ideas. How do you develop good habits and willpower? So small things done consistently in strategic places create major impact. And I really love that quote. Without action, a value is an aspiration only. So sometimes we spend a lot of time thinking about all the things that we want to do, but we're in motion. We're not committing to action. Oh, so an overview of habits. A habit is an automatic behavior. Luckily, 45% of our daily behaviors are habits, which is great because the development of habits, again, reduces our cognitive overload. So the more we can automate in our lives, the more productive we can be, and the more RAM space we have for creative thinking. Habits reduce cognitive overload. Habits are also the compound interest of self-improvement. They can work for you, but they can also work against you depending on what kind of habits that you have. And we try not to say judgments around habits, that you have good habits or bad habits, but you have habits that either bring you closer to the person that you want to be or farther away from the person that you want to be. Developing new habits require patience. It takes a lot of time to develop new habits. There's a lot of different, time periods that are quoted. Some people say 30 days, 45 days, but really it's the frequency that matters. And we'll talk about a little bit, but how satisfying it is. Sometimes it can be really quick to develop a bad habit, and it can take a long time to develop, certain good habits. Atomic habits, they're small little habits that are part of a larger system. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So why are small habits, important? It's the power of tiny gains. So success is a few simple disciplines practiced every single day, while failure is really just simply a few errors in judgment repeated every day. So, making small changes over a prolonged period really lead to larger gains in the long run. And I think that's what's so hard about habits is, if the outcome that you want to achieve is a six-pack, so the habit you're trying to develop is core work. I mean, it takes months to develop a six-pack, coupled with, a lot of dietary changes. And some people just don't have the body composition to develop, six-packs. But really, like that habit you're making, maybe every day you're not seeing changes, but if you're making a change 6 months later, definitely there are improvements. So it's the aggregation of marginal gains. So if you're 1% better each day for a year, you're 38 times better in a year. And I think that's the challenging part of developing habits or cultivating habits, is because they require so much patience. So I think this is really a nice way to think about habits. So as you have outcomes, process, and identity as the layers of behavioral change. So outcomes are what you want to get. So maybe you want a six-pack, right? The process are what you do. So you're doing core work every single day. That's the system that you're trying to develop to gain the outcome that you want of the six-pack. But really the identity, what you believe, is what makes habits long lasting. So your identity could be, I want to be a stronger, healthier person. And so when you adopt that identity, then you build a system of habits that help you become that person. So how do you build this identity? We all have these ideals that we want to achieve. So the word identity is derived from the Latin words essentitas, which is being. And for anyone that knows how to pronounce Latin, feel free to unmute yourself and correct me. Or identidem, repeatedly. So identity literally means repeated beingness. So habits are about becoming somebody. So look at the outcomes that you want to achieve and really work backwards to that identity. So if you want to become, an excellent clinician or a leader in your area, what are the habits that you need to achieve to become that person? So I think the habit loop is important to talk about too. So there's 4 steps of a habit loop. There's cue and craving, which are really the problem. And we'll talk a little bit more about these. And then there's the solution, which is the response and the reward. So the cue is the external stimuli that creates a craving. So a cue might be you wake up in the morning and you're feeling tired. The craving is you want to feel more alert. The response is you drink a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. And then the reward is you feel more awake. And before you know it, your habit is you're drinking a cup of coffee every morning as soon as you wake up. So the 4 laws of behavior change. So whenever you're trying to develop a new habit, the cue, so make it obvious. So if you want to develop a new habit of, say, running, because your identity, you're trying to achieve that identity of becoming a healthier person, make it obvious. So put your running shoes in the middle of the floor, so on the path to your coffee. So you stumble over your running shoes in the morning when you wake up, and that's your cue to go running. Your craving, so make it attractive. So what can you do to make it more attractive? Say you really love listening to audiobooks, or you really love listening to music. Pair that with running so it's more attractive. I will only listen to audiobooks when I go running. Like, I really love listening to audiobooks, and so, but sometimes it could be hard for me to motivate, early in the morning when it's really cold outside, I'm a little tired. So I listen to my favorite audiobooks when I'm running. I'll make it easy. So if you're trying to develop a new habit, and your new habit's running, for instance, and you're not a runner, don't go out and run 5 miles. Set your running shoes in the middle of the floor, your cue, make it attractive, listen to your audiobook if you enjoy doing that, make it easy, run around the block, and then, come back, make it satisfied. Save your cup of coffee until you get home, and then you can enjoy your cup of coffee. And then once you develop that habit, you can kind of expand on it. But you need to start somewhere to have something to expand on. So some tips and tricks. I think that, reflecting on your identity and the person that you want to become, I think is really helpful to build habits around that. So identity-based habits, at least in the literature, the ones that stick the most. Changing your cues is really, really important too. So if you're having a hard time sticking to a habit, maybe you need to change your cues. If you want to drink more water, put a water bottle in front of you all day when you're sitting. And then when it's empty, you fill it back up. If you want to eat healthier, pack a healthier lunch the night before you're starving, and you run to the cafeteria and get like a greasy fried meal because you've already packed a healthier lunch. You want to go to the gym more or work out more, sleep in your workout clothes. So, change your cues to make these behaviors more obvious. Reducing your activation energy is really important. So if you want to become stronger, do 1 push-up instead of 1,000, and get in the habit of doing push-ups every day, and then you can build from there. Create an implementation intention. So if you find that you're not succeeding at the habit that you want to cultivate, it's really helpful to create an implementation intention. And what that means is, I will do this habit at this time. So if you're trying to meditate more, for example, I will meditate first thing in the morning after I turn my alarm off. And now you've created kind of like a SMART goal. It's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's time bound. So you're setting a time of when and where you're going to do something. And habit stacking is a form of implementation intention. So habit stacking is looking at the keystone habits that you already have. So I already have a habit that I drink coffee every single morning without fail. And so recently my kids are in piano, and I was trying to figure out a way to practice piano so I could learn with them. And I was trying to cultivate the habit of playing piano every morning for 5 minutes, right? Super easy, something that I can actually weave into my morning, but month after month, I wasn't doing it. So my habit stacking was, after I make my cup of coffee, I will sit down at the piano and play whatever songs my kids are playing for 5 minutes. And then I was able to do it more consistently. Changing your environment is really important too. If you're trying to get up earlier, put your alarm clock outside the door. There was an example of someone that was trying to wake up early, and everything that they implemented, they failed at. So what they did is to turn off their alarm clock, they needed to scan a QR code, which they kept in the bathroom. And so they had to wake up, go to the bathroom to get the QR code to scan it to turn off the alarm clock. So there is always, something you can do. And then temptation bundling. So this is another way to implement a new habit. So if you're trying to work out more and you really love social media, say that's like your productivity drain, where you just look at social media for hours, don't allow yourself to log into social media until you do 10 push-ups. Or there was another story about someone that really needed to exercise more, but they had a Netflix addiction. So they were also a programmer. So essentially they somehow hooked up a bike to their TV, and they could only watch Netflix if they were biking at a particular speed. And if they slowed down, then the TV would shut off. So you can hack your habits. There's a lot of different ways you can hack your habits. So mindset, master your decisive moments. So what I mean by that is when you come home in the evening and you're trying to cultivate a habit of working out more, and that's the best time for you to do it, sometimes that decisive moment might be putting on your workout clothes or turning on the TV. And if you put on your workout clothes, you go and work out, which is great. But if you turn on the TV, before you know it, you have a bag of chips and you're like watching Netflix all night. Habits are the entry point, so start small, make it easy, reduce the activation energy, and then consider, what are your gateway habits? So the gateway habits are, this simple habits that start the process. So I know for me, if I wake up in the morning and I don't feel like going on a run, but I put my shoes on, my running shoes on, that is my gateway habit to go on a run. It's very rare that I put my running shoes on and then I take them off and I decide not to run. Framing, mindset's everything. So I have to versus I get to. I have to go on a run because I need to be healthy versus I get to work on my endurance and strength. I'm so lucky that I have this opportunity to do this in this beautiful city I can run year round in. Be aware of motion versus action. So motion is a form of preparation, but can also be a form of procrastination. So what I mean by that is if you're trying to be healthier and eat healthier, and you read 50 cookbooks over the course of 3 months to figure out how to eat healthier, that's motion. You haven't actually committed to any action of eating healthier. Start somewhere and you can iterate over time. I have a habit tracker. Who else has a habit tracker? Nobody has a habit tracker? So I think a habit tracker, you can either make your own or buy one, but I think it's a really great way to stick to your habits. It really utilizes all the different rules of behavior change. So it makes it obvious, right? Because you're recording it every single day. Essentially, you write a habit here, like meditate in the morning. And every day you do that habit for that month, you put a little dot, right? So you're making it obvious. If you open your habit tracker every day, because you've developed a habit tracker of doing it every day, then you're making it obvious by seeing the habits you aren't doing or you are doing. And it also keeps you honest. You've made it attractive. So progress is a really good form of meditation. So if you've meditated, or motivation. So if you've meditated 28 days, you don't want to break that streak. So you often will do that 29th day and on because you're like, wow, I've done so well. I'm going to continue on. It's satisfying. We all love to check things off our to-do list and mark X's next to things. So that's satisfying. It's rewarding. It's helping you cast votes for the type of person that you want to become. And now I'm just going to end really quickly over the next 5 minutes. Just a quick overview of willpower. So willpower consists of I won't. So what are you saying no to? I will. What are you saying yes to? And I want. Who do you want to become? It can be trained, so you can do, and we won't get into this today, but there's different strategies that you can implement to increase your willpower over time. But again, the more you exercise willpower, it's like a muscle, it gets tired over time. It's a finite resource, so it's a lot easier to optimize your environment. If you want to eat healthier, you don't want to fill your cupboard with chips and cookies, because then you have to spend all this energy, having willpower to say no to them. Optimize your environment and clean out your cupboards. Thoughts. You can't control your thoughts, but you can control how you choose to act on them. Just some quick tips. So willpower is improved with increased heart rate variability, which is a measure of fitness, and lower levels of stress. So things that you can use or strategies you can employ to increase your HRV is meditation. And that's actually one of the best strategies you can employ to increase your HRV, happiness and exercise. Your HRV decreases with sadness, anger, stress, and periods of sleep deprivation. When you're having, high levels of stress, like this fight or flight response, taking a moment to take a few deep breaths and pause and plan is a way to increase your HRV and strengthen your willpower. States that inhibit your prefrontal cortex, which decreases your willpower, things like stress and chronic sleep deprivation, of course, alcohol. Guilty is an anti-pattern. So if you're feeling guilty, it's also a willpower killer. If you're feeling guilty about something, you don't want to think about it, and you're not self-reflecting and learning from it. So self-compassion and forgiveness is really helpful actually for willpower. Schedule your willpower challenge for when you have the most energy. If you're trying to exercise and you're just wiped out at the end of the day, try to do it first thing in the morning if you're most energetic. And if you're, really struggling on implementing some of these things, picture your future self and treat your future self the same way you would treat yourself today. So if you picture your future self as this, really in shape, a really healthy person, think about today. How would you treat your future self today to accomplish that? So just to conclude, I know we're ending right on time. Create a system for moving tasks out of your head to to-do lists. That captures really, really important for creating, for freeing up space for creative thinking. Utilizing the one-touch rule is really helpful for improving email efficiency. So each email you should touch only once, and then you decide what you're going to do with it. Improving your willpower, it's easier to avoid temptation than to resist it. So optimizing your environment is really, really important for improving your willpower. Optimizing your environment is also helpful for improving your productivity, as well as using timers to keep you accountable to that productivity zone. And when you're starting a new habit, start small, make it easy, make it obvious, and make it satisfying. All really great books that I couldn't remember where I pulled from what, but I kind of wove a lot of things together, and there's a lot of overlapping ideas in these books. So I encourage you, if any of this spoke to you, these are all really great books. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing, Ashley. This is super helpful. I particularly like the part about habits being like compounding interest. It's very good food for thought about thinking both the negative and positive things that we do that have big impacts on our life. Does anybody have any questions for Ashley while we have her here? I see some claps, so hearing no questions and seeing no comments. One comment about loving the atomic habits. Seeing no questions in the comments and hearing no one unmute themselves. Thank you, Ashley, so much for sharing. To the group, we'll take maybe, if you guys want the full break, chime in and let me know now. Otherwise, we'll take maybe a 10-minute pause before Josh and Matias present. Is that okay with you guys, Josh and Matias?
We'll be ready.
Okay.
So
right.
6:15.
Yeah, why don't we reconvene at 18:15? And Ashley, thank you so much for sharing. Feel free to stick around or feel free to go home. I know you're still in the office.
Oh, I am going to start walking home, but I'm going to call into this presentation. So yes, I will be participating in the next part. It'll just be on foot.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for a night of soft skills in our Preceptor development series. I know many of you on the call, but I also don't know many of you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matias Campos. I'm a clinical pharmacist at UCSF. I find myself these days mostly on adult medicine at the Parnassus campus. I am also a surgery pharmacist as well at Mission Bay. And my colleagues at Mission Bay, our children's hospital, have given me an honorary title of pediatric pharmacist and pediatric oncology pharmacist. So wear many hats. I'll pass it over to Josh so that he can introduce himself.
Yeah. So yes, my name is Joshua Robinson, and I'm one of our pediatric pharmacists at Benioff Children's in San Francisco, and I predominantly practice in our cardiac intensive care unit and with our heart transplant team.
All right, thanks. So there will be some audience poll. I'll actually add this link in the chat so that for those of you who are on your desktops or laptops can actually just click it and we'll connect you to our audience polling software. If you're on your cell phone, you can also text crucial to the number on the screen, 22333. Of course, we don't want this to be the only method of audience participation in our conversation this evening. So please use the emoji features on Zoom, use the chat feature on Zoom to share questions, unmute yourselves. We will have time built in for conversation throughout the topic. So please don't hesitate to do that. Let me go back here. We have no financial disclosures, unfortunately. I wish I did have some. And here are objectives for the evening: defining what are crucial conversations and why they matter, discovering the power of dialogue, reviewing the do's and don'ts of when it comes to crucial conversations, and applying these to precepting and general professional situations. So when it came to researching material for these soft skills, it can be rather challenging sometimes. I know my first knee-jerk reaction for these kinds of presentations is to do literature searches. Unfortunately, when it comes to these soft skills, it's not very easy to do a PubMed search on what a crucial conversation is. So as I alluded to at the end of our prior colleague's presentation, there is a shout out to Ashley, who had lent me this book at the end of the summer as a resource to kick off this presentation. I have it here with me as well. And we really, after this book, after she had lent it to me, it came up several times in some of the literature that we were searching. There's a couple of AJHP articles that actually cited this book. I lent it to Josh and we enjoyed it so much, we figured we could distill some of the best points for you this evening, and it'll really be the framework for the rest of the conversation this afternoon. It conceptualizes crucial conversations in a really interesting way. Unfortunately, we won't have time to talk about all of the points that the book covers, but we'll cover what we thought was the most important to share with everyone and the most relevant for pharmacy practice and beyond. So what comes to mind when we think of crucial conversations? It conjures up images of maybe politicians at a table debating foreign policy or domestic policy, or it involves senior pharmacy leadership making decisions on where to invest capital funds to construct a new pharmacy. These discussions are or have widespreading impact. These are not what we have in mind. We are referring to the interactions that happen every day and the day-to-day conversations that make up what we do in our jobs. So by definition, A crucial conversation is a discussion between two or more people where, one, the stakes are high, two, opinions vary, and three, emotions run strong. What makes these conversations crucial and not just challenging, frustrating, scary, or annoying is that the results of these conversations can have a huge impact on your quality of life. We'll go to our first audience poll question. I'm hoping everyone can log in. It does look like it's active. Based on that conversation, thanks Dexter. Based on that definition, since the start of the new year, have you had to participate in a crucial conversation, whether at work or outside of work? We'll give everyone a few minutes to clock in their answer. So it looks like we're having some answers come in. So it looks like by far the majority is 77% in the last 14 days have had a crucial conversation. And you know, the point of this question is to highlight the fact of how pervasive these are, not only in our personal lives, but in our professional lives. And what we found and what these authors found is that we don't have practice to have these conversations. And what Josh and I hope to do tonight is kind of share with you some of the things that these authors who spent several years interviewing professions from across the professional spectrum, healthcare, finance, tech, industry, where they have seen, particularly in the professional workspaces, what works and what doesn't work when it comes to crucial conversations. Okay, so let's break down those three elements of a crucial conversation. First, high stakes. These conversations involve risk if there is no success. And of course, if there is no risk, then by default, that conversation is not crucial, not essential. And some examples that we have in our day-to-day professional pharmacy practice are whether or not to pass or fail a student, ensuring that our patients receive the right medication, and assessing staff performance for a raise. These conversations are of high risk, and therefore, because of the outcome on the quality of life can be high. And opposing opinions or contrasting thoughts or disagreement. We'll talk later a little bit more about what it means to, what the pool of meaning is, but by nature, two people who are having these kinds of conversations don't have the same opinion. If they did, that would no longer be a conversation and would default to agreement. For example, a student believes that he or she should pass, but the preceptor does not. A provider wishes to start a medication at a certain dose, but the pharmacist disagrees with that dose due to renal function. Or an employee believes that they should be promoted, but their supervisor doesn't agree. And of course, by nature, humans are emotional. Strong emotions are a part of any crucial conversation. They are instinctive or intuitive feelings that are distinguished from reasoning or knowledge. We'll talk a little bit later about how we are designed to elicit a certain kind of response rather than one that we want. So for example, a student becoming visibly emotional during a feedback session, a provider responding curtly and rejecting a dosing recommendation, and an employee upset by a subpar performance review. So what are some examples of crucial conversations? They happen in our everyday life. We know this. In our personal lives, outside of work, whether discussing relationship status with a significant other, requesting a family member to repay a loan, or asking a roommate to move out. In our professional lives at work, we sometimes have to address offensive language or comments with a coworker, giving a supervisor feedback on behavior or breach of safety policies, and asking a team member about missing deadlines. And of course, for those of us that Precept students, which should be all of us in our development series, providing constructive feedback or giving an unfavorable evaluation of a learner and discussing with a learner when perhaps they have taken their role too far or they perhaps don't understand what their role is. So what are some approaches to these crucial conversations? For whatever reason, these moments are when we are our absolute worst. When conversations are more crucial, the less likely we are to have them. And that's because we're genetically designed wrong. We have been designed by natural selection to handle conversations with the flight or fight response, rather than intelligent persuasion and gentle attentiveness. Our adrenal glands pump adrenaline, and that makes us, that diverts blood flow to our legs, our lungs, and our heart. And instead of our brain, where we actually want it to be so that we can process the conversations that we're having with our colleagues. We're under pressure. Most of the time, these conversations are spontaneous and we don't have time to think about it. And we don't know what to do. We don't have practice with these kinds of conversations. So we either tend to avoid them, face them with a poor outcome, or of course, the best of the three, face them with a positive outcome. Okay, so conversations obviously require dialogue. And much like other things in medicine and pharmacy practice, it is an art. So another audience poll question that we'll have a few minutes to for everyone to clock in their answer. Hopefully this should be live. It is. How much do you look forward to having dialogue, either with a colleague, either with a supervisor, another healthcare provider? So we're getting a variety of answers here. So for those of us that don't know emojis, A is I'm happy to have one, B is I'm scared to have one, C is I don't really care about having one, and D is I'm angry when I have one. So this question highlights the fact that the majority of people are uncomfortable. And interestingly, our authors found that 10 to 15% of people actually enjoy having crucial conversations. And that's what we're seeing here in our small sample size. Okay, moving on. So more definitions, dialogue, the free flow of meaning between two or more people that relies on the free flow of relevant information. When it comes to these risky, controversial, and emotional conversations, skilled people find a way to get all that relevant information out into the open. People need to feel comfortable to openly and honestly express their opinion, share their feelings, and articulate their theories. This is what we consider dialogue. And my colleague Josh will talk a little bit later how we can foster this. So, free flow of meaning. When any participant enters into a conversation, they have differing opinions, feelings, theories, and experiences. This makes up their personal pools of meaning. In our Venn diagram here, person one and person two have their own pool of meaning, and it's unique to each of us. It not only informs us, but it propels our actions in our everyday life. When two or more people enter into a crucial conversation, by our earlier definition, they do not share this same pool of meaning. Their opinions differ. Person one believes one thing, person two another. Person one has one history and person two has another. People who are skilled at dialogue do their best to make it safe for everyone to add their meaning to the shared pool. Even if ideas are controversial, at odds, or wrong, this combination of views and feelings leads to the shared pool of meaning and not a singular meaning from one individual. So when more people are sharing, that shared pool of meaning gets bigger. So as the participants in a crucial conversation have more exposure to accurate and relevant information, it leads to better choices. Shared meaning encourages actions on decisions with unity and conviction. This obviously doesn't mean that a supervisor doesn't have the final say all the time and that all decisions need to be in consensus. We are just stating that having greater shared meaning in the pool leads to better choices, unity, and conviction. We've all seen that what happens when that shared pool is very shallow. When people purposefully withhold meaning and information from one another, individually smart people can do collectively foolish things. Particularly in this world of medicine that we live in, one example I want to share with today, with hyper specialization in certain fields, I feel like sometimes all of the providers or healthcare providers that are engaged in the patient's care don't all talk to each other, and everyone comes in with their own shared pool of meaning. So this is something that we encounter in our everyday life. So therefore, we should try our best to share our pool of meaning, particularly as pharmacists, because our pool has to do with drugs. And that's where our precepting comes in, our conversations with other healthcare providers. And at this point, I think I'm going to hand it over to Josh.
Yes, thank you. That's a great start. So moving forward, most of the rest of this conversation is going to be about fostering dialogue. So one thing we found reading this book, and me personally, I really enjoyed it as well, was the power of dialogue and how meaningful it is with regards to having crucial conversations and how you address crucial confrontations. So 4 primary areas that we will look at is here on the screen. So first one will be start with heart. Then we'll move on to learn to look, make it safe, and then master your stories. Next, please. So in regards to start with heart, so the first thing is you have to start with the right motives and stay focused. So whenever you're in any kind of conversation and it starts moving crucial, so where people start disagreeing, the first thing we all have to learn to teach ourselves is to start with yourself, is pretty much what this is saying. Look at yourself and see how you're managing and dealing with your own emotions and feelings, and how you're pushing your agenda and your ideas on the group. Are you adding them to the shared pool, as Matias was talking about, or are you pushing them on other people? The next thing is to be honest and accept the views of others. This is something that many people struggle with. They think their ideas are great, and we struggle with that shared pool, but we have to come to that agreement that we have to be honest, and whether we totally agree with their points are their points, and they do add to the pool and make it better. The next thing would be refocus the conversation back to the true meaning. So many times with regards to crucial conversations, and when we start getting awry, we're not focusing on the true thing we wanted to discuss. People's emotions came in, it went down different paths. And what you need to do is share with people a way to come back to the center. So ask questions that help refocus the conversation. So some examples would be when it starts going, if a conversation starts getting heated, would be stepping back, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth here in a minute, and asking yourself and the person or persons you're with, what are we really wanting to achieve out of this conversation? And how do we get back to that instead of going down our emotional rabbit hole many times? The next thing would be finding your bearings, which is truly asking yourself what you really want out of that conversation. And then lastly, we'll always go with always focus on your desired goal and what you truly want to avoid. So as you experience this and start observing your conversations, which is something I took in after reading this book, you'll start seeing and you'll start seeing where your conversations start to move in a crucial manner, where they're becoming heated either with your spouse or significant other or with a colleague or someone else. And you'll watch how that approaches, and you'll start trying to find ways of starting with yourself and redirecting or getting back on track. So next, please. So that ties in very well with this idea of learning to look. So what it is learning to find when the conversation moves crucial. So that moment at which it moves crucial. So I'm going to start with the right side first. So we have to always learn how to monitor that, see how people feel, watch their reactions, know our own reactions. So know what we feel like when we are moving into a crucial conversation. Owning your own style under stress. And I'll show you mine actually here in a moment. When you're looking at a dialogue and you see that it's falling apart, ask yourself, is it because of the content? Is it because of the topic? Is it a debated topic, but is it approaching the goal you want? Or is it a condition? Is it the reaction to that? And then sooner you'll notice it easier and faster. It's just like with any other skill. This is something that you can learn, and you will develop these skills the more that you sit back and observe. Next, please. All right. So spotting crucial conversations. So getting into that ideas of knowing yourself, and then you can also know your audience. So knowing those physical signs. So some of those physical signs can be, when you're going into a conversation that is going to be crucial, or you feel it could be. I mean, an easy example that I can think of is giving constructive feedback, or having a serious situation of having a learner not meeting expectations. Knowing that your stomach gets tight, you get it, just like speaking, it feels like your throat's dry, it feels like you have a sock in the back of your throat. You may get anxious, you may get nervous, that starts getting into the emotional side. And then knowing your own and others' behavior style. So are they closed off? Are they crossing their arms? Are they open to the conversation? Are they playing or fidgeting with their fingers because they're anxious? Have they become quiet? So one of the biggest things is people go silent most of the time when this happens. And that actually destroys the pool of knowledge, because you're not pooling knowledge at that point. That person's not contributing because they don't feel safe, which is going to be something we talk about more. So knowing these signs and being aware of them so that you see them and you can see how to redirect away from them. So, like I said, the next thing would look at spotting safety. So after you learn how to read yourself and other people, you can see the predominant emotion, actually most people, is fear. We actually, and I will even admit it myself, most of us struggle with truly understanding or truly defining emotions. We struggle with our vocabulary. We say that we're mad and angry at something when really we maybe are embarrassed, to be truthful, or we're fearful of what's going on. So really looking at your emotions and understanding that the predominant one is fear, usually due to the condition of the conversation. So safety becomes a problem where someone doesn't feel safe. Normally it's because of it's the conditions, it's not the topic itself. So it's how it was addressed, or it's how they feel something was addressed. It's not the actual content. So making someone feel safe actually helps open them up to do that, and doing something to make it safe. So we'll also talk about this as well, but really putting in a big effort to, when you see that person stepping back, maybe stepping out of the crucial part of the conversation, and redeveloping safety. That's probably one of the #1 leading skills to keep a crucial conversation on a productive path and not go down one of the bad paths of a poorer outcome. So going back to what I said and knowing your style under stress. So this hyperlink right here actually takes you to their website, and you can take this really short. It's like a 12-question yes or no test, and it gives you results on how you would react based on 3 things. And on the next screen, I'll just share mine. This is something I sat down and did this past weekend to really try to understand. So what I see with me is I move more towards silence. I actually go into masking, avoiding, or withdrawing from the conversations whenever I get into crucial situations. And it helps me learn how to deal with that. So masking is more like using sarcasm, trying to cover up the problem, thinking about that, acting like it's nonchalant. It's not really an issue, but truthfully it is. You're just avoiding the problem. The next 2 are self-explanatory. The other one is violence and looking at that. So what that means is controlling the conversation and making sure that what you're saying is what is actually going on, or labeling people. This is a part of our culture that actually is very big, that we always want to label everything and categorize. But doing that sets us up for failure with regards to the stereotypes and everything. And then the last one is attacking. So verbal attacks on people. So that's it just shuts people down. And it's way that you can look at this. So understanding where you are, and I recommend people do this, helps you understand where your starting point is. This isn't what defines you. It helps you understand where you come into a conversation and how you can move forward from it. Next, please. So like I said, when you do get into a crucial conversation and you recognize that it's moved to crucial, and then you notice that safety is being lost. So people go quiet in a big meeting because one person's dominating the conversation, or you start hearing screaming. The best thing is honestly to step out and step back. Step back, take stock in yourself, evaluate yourself. Did you go into this with the right motives? Are you controlling your own motives and your own emotions? Are you recognizing and reading your story? So are you recognizing and reading the conversation is happening correctly? Or are you letting your emotions control you? Once you figure that out, then you try to rebuild safety with your group. You state things that are really need to stay with the facts. You can go to your emotions and state that I feel like this conversation is not doing well, or it's become extremely heated. I feel people aren't speaking up and I don't know why, and try to start building the conversation together again. And then once you building that safety, and then once the group has that safety rebuilt, then you can get back into conversation, because in that rebuilding of safety, you're going to center yourself back to the goals of what you wanted out of that conversation. And that's what you have to establish. So the next question, or the next slide, is another little poll everywhere. So how do you build safety in a conversation? Good one. Give it a few more seconds to let other people respond. Having an escape route. Okay. Contrasting, good one. Yes, someone's read. Opportunities for open communication, good. Compiling all the opinions and facts before re-engaging, that's a great one. Sometimes you can't restart the conversation and you need to take a lot of time to step back. And then you can get back into it, talking about what you didn't and did intend. Perfect. apologize. Okay, I think that's a good amount of stuff. So good, these are all great things. So all of these are right. Validating feelings, good. Oh, the next slide, thanks, good. All of these are totally right. But to break it down into just two simple columns, it's develop a mutual purpose in the group and develop mutual respect. So the primary reason crucial conversations go awry is people's purpose in the conversation isn't the same. What they walked into it, how they looked at it, everything, what they wanted from it wasn't the same. And we got to develop that mutual purpose. If it isn't shared, it is something that can be developed by the group, especially once safety is built. And this is the best way of how you can build it. With the mutual purpose equals a safety zone. So when you have a shared purpose or a shared goal, it equals a safety zone. Many of us have very strong opinions and feelings. Most of us are very strong type A people, and it's great, but you have to share this purpose, and it has to be a purpose that everyone agrees to, or that's where you start getting awry in the conversation. Under mutual respect, it's just a requirement to stay in dialogue. People have to feel that they are respected and heard, or they do step out and go to silence or go to violence. Sadly enough, I think we've seen that even in our nation right now. So we do need to set up and allow people, or excuse me, we do need to respect others so that they do stay in dialogue and we can come up with something better. And then mutual respect is a must. It's a must for everyone. Next. So some skills to restore safety, as many of you mentioned before, is the first one is apologize, but only apologize when it's appropriate. Don't just apologize for having a bad conversation, because you weren't the only one who went into it. You maybe said things that you think are wrong, but actually state that. State that I apologize that I said so-and-so is illiterate. That make it specific so that they actually know. But don't apologize for things you didn't do, because it sets up people falsely trusting. They won't trust you. They think that you're just saying it to get back to what you wanted to do. You can also use a form of contrasting, which is a technique to help fix misunderstandings. Many times, most of the reason is the mutual purpose isn't totally established and isn't the same for everyone. And then people misinterpret and misunderstand what is in the conversation and where it's going. So a great way to think about this is that address other people's concerns when you're using the contrasting techniques. Make sure that you tell them that you don't, addressing others' concerns that they don't feel respected, or that you have malicious purpose, stating that that's not what you were intending. You didn't come to this conversation to make them feel horrible or to control everything, that you came to this because you felt hurt, or list your emotion that you actually are feeling, and you're wanting to address that. A very common one is maybe at work, you're working on a project and you weren't invited to a meeting with the boss, but you see the person you're working on it with did meet with them. Addressing that problem with that person is saying, I feel that I was not included. I feel that you are taking over the project. It made me hurt. It made me feel hurt that you didn't think to include me. Because the reason why they met with the boss maybe wasn't even related to the project. You don't know that because you don't know what their meaning was. So they may be reducing something else entirely. So going into it so that people understand where they're feeling, and that helps people restore, oh, well, that wasn't what I was intended. The person say, well, that was actually my performance evaluation that we met with the boss. So it had nothing to do with this project. And you just misunderstood that. And then work on creating that mutual purpose. So this is a big part of restoring that trust. And there's a great mnemonic called CRIB that helps establish that. So on the next slide, we'll go over what CRIB is. So CRIB stands for Commitment to Seeking a Mutual Purpose. So once emotions calm down and y'all address how to restore safety and we want to continue the conversation, everyone in the group has to commit to seeking a mutual purpose. They have to recognize the purpose behind the strategy. So what is the purpose of this whole conversation and where are we wanting to go with this? If it's not something that's well established and maybe people had different purposes, you can work on inventing a shared purpose so that everyone feels like they're included and the safety is restored. So then you feel like you can move it somewhere. And that can be done with the last, brainstorming new strategies. So figuring out the new ideas on what it actually means and what is the mutual purpose. All right. So the next one is master your stories. So is this something I mentioned a little bit ago? And stories really are your emotions. It's understanding how you read that. And this is also getting into that emotional vocabulary. So this means simply controlling your emotions is what's mastering your stories. Understanding how you feel and then asking yourself, would a true, logical, genuine person come into this conversation and really be attacking me if you're thinking that they're attacking you or if that your emotion has gone to fear? And most of the time when we think about that, it's not, it's just what came to our brain first. When we think about it, we always come up with an emotion and then our emotion drives us making that story in a conversation. And most of the time, we initially always start off with our very big emotional side. So the person did this because of X, and normally it's very negative. And that's why we normally deal with these conversations poorly. However, when you think back, when you take a time and step back and think about, is the person really trying to hurt you or negatively affect you? Most of us, once we put our emotions in check, we realize we're not. So the biggest thing is learning how to control your emotions and learning what your emotions truly are. And like I said, the biggest one probably is fear for this situation, but we always mix it up with anger. So ways that emotions affect us is like it said there on the bottom. So in the purpose of mastering your stories, we create this interpretation of the discussion, like I said. So based on our historical experiences, based upon previous crucial conversations with this person or with others, based upon positive and negative outcomes, based upon how people reacted, we always create this, but you really have to pull that back. And that's what gets back to that first one when it's called start with heart. So you start with yourself and think about the emotions. These are always subjective when it comes to story. And most of the time they aren't totally factual. The best example is many times we said that that person didn't include us in going to the boss because maybe they were trying with regards to a shared project and they were trying to make themselves look better. But there's no facts behind that. That is your thought of that process. You didn't even know what happened. So really take back and actually go to the facts. Say, I know the person met with the boss. That is fact. I don't know why they did. So let's address that because that's what's driving your emotion. Since we create these stories, we can retrace them like I just did, and we can create different ones that make more logical sense or that open up the conversation with the people that we're having these conversations with. Excellent. So the next slide, very short and simple. There's a lot of meaning behind this slide. So when we retrace our paths, we need to think and notice our behaviors. We need to stop and pay attention to what did we actually do? How did we behave? So we're not saying that you will always stop and retrace your behaviors during every crucial conversation because that's unpractical, but you can also do this retrospectively and make yourself better and go back to the person. Maybe it was too heated and you said you took stock in yourself to figure out what's going on. The next step would be to feel or notice your feelings. So once we recognize that we've had a behavior, healthy or unhealthy, we can start exploring the feelings and emotions behind that. So this seems easy, but it's actually quite difficult. Most people are, like I said, emotionally, most people have a struggle with describing their emotions. Their emotional vocabulary isn't the greatest. We come up with the simple words of I'm angry, I feel bad, when, like I stated before, they actually may be embarrassed or they were surprised in the conversation. Many times this is probably one of the hardest ones to do because you do need to sit back and think about it, how you reacted and why. The next one is telling your story. So start analyzing your stories. So this is that part, we've kind of gone over it, but it's thinking about it from, would a genuine, kind-hearted person that you've worked with forever, or your spouse that you do love, would they really be coming at you and attacking you? Or did you analyze this wrong? And coming up with that genuine story of, why was this happening? And that ties into the last one, which is the seeing / the hearing, or getting back to the facts. So going back to the facts, knowing what you know, and filling in the gaps with the other person or persons in your conversation. And that helps you define your stories better and understand where they came from. Next thing is to just recognize 3 clever stories. These are all 3 bad stories that most of us have probably have done. We do them fast in 2 seconds, especially driving here in the Bay Area. Most of us get into that with people cutting you off, and you're like, that person is names we shouldn't say. And you don't even know what that person is doing, what they have going on in their lives. So one thing is the victim story. So it's the thing we all know of as like the woe is me. I had to do this because that person, or excuse me, everything's wrong. I don't know, I struggle with describing this one. I know how it feels and I know I do it, but it's really having the story of, you attacked me, so this is why I did that, or this is describing that aspect. The villain story, so that person is just hateful and a bigot, is a great one. They aren't really evaluating that person, that's just what automatically comes out. Or the helpless story, which is also kind of like the victim story of woe is me. There was no way else I could do this. I was helpless, I didn't get to make the choices. But we do control our own emotions. We control the stories we create in a conversation. So we go to these, but they're normally not the right story. It's just what we always initially go to because it's how we're made up. Next. So getting into some of the do's and don'ts. First, the do's, because I like to start with the positive. Listen. I mean, it seems so simple, but we actually need to really listen and pay attention to people when they speak in our conversations. Many times we are running what we want to say and how we feel through our brain during the whole conversation, and you didn't hear anything that person said. And you do need to just sit back and listen most of the times. I'm very bad with that. So I'm trying to work on that myself. Mind our manners, our thoughts and our emotions. So what we've been talking about, taking stock, stepping back, truly evaluating what are our thoughts and our emotions, watching our manners and mannerisms. So our physical mannerisms can set people off into creating something that we don't even think about. So crossing our arms, reclusing down, turning red, feeling your blood pressure boil, understanding that. Sit back and ask yourself why. Why is that happening? Is they really attacking you, or try to figure that out? Do not sacrifice candor for respect, but do not sacrifice candor to keep the conversation alive, because it won't stay alive, but you always can be respectful when you give the truth, even if it's not what people want to hear. You can word it in very nice ways. One of my favorite ways is to ask questions with it. But you should never tell a white lie to be truthful. You should be honest so that the people actually value your opinion. And always hold all accountable for the roles and responsibilities. We should never, when you start allowing people to get by because they're so-and-so, or they're the boss, or they're this, it doesn't hold people responsible, and it actually just festers inside of you and sets you up to either move to silence or violence with regards to killing conversations. Next. The don't. So kind of what we've been talking about. Silence. Silence kills. It kills conversations. It makes relationships go bad. It kills the whole system. There's 3 primary ways of silence. As stated, we have masking, which is sarcasm, sugarcoating things, sarcasm and sugarcoating. Avoiding is literally just avoidance, staying away from the conversations, even though we need to have them. And then withdrawal. So people actually go into the conversations, but then contributing nothing because they don't want to deal with these people. They don't want to deal with the conversation. They recluse into themselves. Violence. We do not need to yell or be aggressive with verbiage. Forcing your opinion into the shared pool where it should be shared, it should also be welcome and wanted. You need to build the share pool together and not force your opinion and then negate everyone else's when it's a shared pool. This is a way that many times some bosses and supervisors struggle because it almost feels like they abuse power from that situation. And that's where a lot of them have to take back and step back. We have this ourselves with regards to the student. You need to let the student contribute to that and make sure that you're not abusing power into the conversation because they look up to us like we know everything. And we all know that most of the time we ask them to go look it up to teach us on something. 3 forms of violence are controlling, labeling, and attacking, which we've already gone over. And then the primary thing this book went over, and at first, honestly, I struggled with understanding the meaning of the fool's choice. I know it's a simple concept, but I struggled with it because I was like, I'm a very analytical minded person. So I want it to be very exact. I'm very definition oriented, but the fool's choice is honestly just the easy way out. It can happen with regards to doing anything and everything to make the conversation end. It can happen to doing anything and everything to send the conversation into a crucial conversation with a poor outcome because you just really don't want to have it, but it makes you build ammo to say, well, we had this conversation, but you really didn't have the conversation. You drove it to a manner that you knew would get the outcome you wanted, and that's not the right way to deal with it either. Next. And now I will hand it back to Matias to go over the evidence.
Thanks, Josh. We cannot have a pharmacy conversation without talking about the evidence. Show me the data. So let us leave behind some of the touchy-feely kind of aspects of our conversation this evening and really talk about how some of these concepts actually affect our patients. So like I mentioned earlier, the authors of this book performed surveys and did studies across a variety of industries. And they actually published this paper, Science Kills: 7 Crucial Conversations in Healthcare. So some background information. All of us are likely familiar with the Institute of Medicine's seminal report To Err is Human. In this report, the IOM identified that 1 in 20 hospital inpatients are given a wrong medication. 3.5 million patients get an infection from someone who didn't wash his or her hands or take other appropriate standard precautions. And more than 250,000 will die because of mistakes while in an inpatient setting. These are per year. They also identified that over 60% of medication errors are likely caused by mistakes in interpersonal communication. And the Joint Commission suggests that communication is a top contributor to sentinel events. So many of our conversations with our other healthcare providers, our students, and our colleagues are crucial because they're high stakes. They involve patient care. So looking at our study, our authors conducted focus groups, interviews, and actually observed individuals in the workplace. The survey data came from more than 1,700 respondents across the healthcare industry, mostly nurses, but also physicians, clinical care staff, including pharmacists, and administrators in 2004. The research sites were mixed, 13 urban, suburban, rural hospitals, and a mix of teaching, general, and pediatric hospitals. So the findings of these surveys and focus groups really broke down where crucial conversations falter amongst members of the interdisciplinary team into these 7 categories: broken rules, mistakes, lack of support, incompetence, poor teamwork, disrespect, and micromanagement. Briefly, over 50% of respondents observed at least one of these 7 behaviors in a coworker. Just to briefly mention to you all some of the findings of these surveys, 53% of nurses were concerned about another peer's competence. When we look at physicians, the number is a little more impressive. 81% of physicians are concerned about a nurse or another clinical care provider's competence. And amongst physicians themselves, 68% are concerned about another physician's competence. Unfortunately, less than 1 in 10 of respondents actually discuss their concerns with a coworker. When it came to physicians, only 7% of nurses are actually comfortable talking to a physician about their concerns. And for most of these respondents, the majority said that these concerns have persisted for more than a year. So these are not one-off things. These are consistent and chronic problems that these respondents identified in the workplace. Here's a quote from a pharmacist that a pharmacist shared during a survey. Some doctors can make incorrect orders. We let it slide, especially if it is a jerk. For example, one physician prescribed a drug that you should give 3 times a day, but he said to give it twice a day. I let it go because it was a pain pill. It wasn't going to make the child any sicker. So unfortunately, more than 9 in 10 of the respondents in the survey responded in some way or form to avoid that crucial or that critical conversation. Let's talk for a second about the less than 1 in 10, that vocal majority. So 5 to 15% of healthcare workers, depending on the issue, step up to these crucial conversations. Staff who are confident in their ability to have these conversations achieve positive outcomes for their patients, for the hospital, and for themselves. Or at least they feel that they do. This is where we stop the line. We hear this constantly from our medication safety staff, that if we feel something is wrong, we need to speak up. We need to have that crucial conversation. So this study also looked at or asked respondents or if they felt that their conversations made an impact in daily care. And for staff that were confident in their ability to discuss concerns regarding incompetence, poor teamwork, and disrespect, they felt that they observed better outcomes. They were more satisfied with their workplace. They exhibited more discretionary effort. In other words, did more things that are outside of their normal day-to-day work, and they intended to stay in their unit and their hospital for longer periods of time. Most of these had weak correlations, but they were all statistically significant. So, since we're approaching the end of the hour, let's take some time to summarize what we talked about and what we feel you should take home with you. So in summary, crucial conversations are discussions where the stakes are high, opinions vary, and emotions run strong. Dialogue is the free flow of information between 2 or more people. We need to foster dialogue when that conversation turns crucial. We need to start with heart. So look at ourselves, learn to look for those moments when the conversations turn crucial, make it safe so that everyone can participate and add into the shared pool of meaning, and master your own story. Making sure that you do not participate in silence and make it safe to add to the pool, and avoiding that choice between what is right and what is easy. So let's wrap up with one final audience poll question. In your professional career, what is the hardest part of fostering dialogue? Kicking off, yep. So a lot of the things that we shared in our conversation today. So in the last few minutes, any questions, conversation, comments, concerns? It's your turn to add information to the shared pool of meaning.
Josh and Matias, thank you very much for giving this presentation. I'll give everyone a couple minutes to go ahead and ask questions. So if you have any, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions. Otherwise, feel free to throw them in the chat if you're not at a spot where you can unmute yourself and talk. Give you guys a couple minutes and we'll be respectful of everyone's time and end the presentation after that.
And give everyone back 15 minutes of their evening.
Isn't that lovely?
That's so great.
I know these are late sessions, so I definitely appreciate everybody coming to them and participating live. I think it's very helpful to have live. Got a lot of thanks trickling in, but it doesn't look like there are any questions. So I will go ahead and end the recording. And just as a reminder to